everyone, my name is Poetker, and I am excited that I get to share one part on the series of relationships. There are many different areas that are crucial to maintaining healthy relationships. However, I think mine is one that can give fear to many: conflict. Well, more precisely, conflict resolution. Even saying the word conflict, I'm sure some of you have already thought to yourself, yep, I hate conflict, or I try to avoid conflict, and some of you may even thrive on conflict. But today, I want to look at why do we avoid conflict, why is it necessary, and what does the Bible say about conflict. Conflict happens in every type of relationship that we have, whether that's friendships, marriages, parents with their kids, our coworkers, dating relationships. Pretty much anytime you interact with a person, you can or will have conflict because we're all different. No one thinks the same as us. The root of conflict can be a difference of opinion, experiences, personality, beliefs. When we're in conflict, it causes a variety of different emotional responses. It can be anger, sadness, withdrawing. And when there is a disagreement, most people I know avoid addressing it at all costs. And this can partially be because of who it's with. Today, I want to narrow our focus, and I want to talk about those people who we are in relationships with, the people we see all the time who love us. Not the random stranger on the internet on a Facebook post that we argue with, though I'm sure some of the things I talk about can probably still apply. So first, why do we avoid conflict? I asked some of my students this questions, and if you don't know, I'm a high school teacher, and high school students will give you blunt, honest answers. And this is what they said for why they avoid conflict. It's too much work, it won't help anything, I don't want to hurt the other person, there's going to be more conflict, I don't want to be misunderstood, or I don't know how the other person's going to react. I think I can summarize all of these things into one sentence: fear of ruining the relationship. We decide that we can deal with it, get over it, put up with it, forgive them, without ever actually talking to or bringing it up with the person. Now, before I continue, I think I need to say that sometimes this is true. There are certain situations where we do need to figure it out on our own, because the person didn't actually do anything wrong, but maybe it was a past hurt, insecurity, some trauma from our past that comes up, and it presses on it. Sometimes our feelings lie to us, and we have to take moments and decide what are areas we need to pursue conflict resolution and what are areas we need to bring to God and get healing on our own. But when we have an emotional response to any situation, it is our job to check our emotions and act accordingly. However, if we're always dealing with conflict internally, it allows for resentment and bitterness to grow in us. Hebrews 12:14-15 says, "Strive for peace with everyone, and for the holiness without no one will see the Lord. See to it that no one fails to obtain the grace of God, that no root of bitterness springs up and causes trouble, and by it many become defiled." When we are not in peace, the root of bitterness has the chance to grow. And the way to stop this is forgiveness. Forgiveness allows for grace to happen in our relationships. You may have heard this quote before: "Unforgiveness is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die." It's not just for them, but it's also for us. Colossians 3:13 says, "Bearing with one another, and if one complains against another, forgiving each other as the Lord has forgiven you, so you must also forgive." This brings me to my second point. Conflict is necessary. It is necessary so we can experience the love that God has for us through the forgiving of others. Jesus Christ forgave us, and we continue to sin against him, though he has never sinned against us. And as we forgive others, we experience the love of Christ. Ephesians 4:32 says, "Instead, be kind to each other, tender-hearted, forgiving one another, just as God through Christ has forgiven you." We are called to forgive. Conflict is also necessary because it fuels change. It's necessary for intellectual, emotional, and moral growth in ourselves and the person in relationship with. I think the hardest part at this point is that we always think, what if the person we're bringing this to doesn't listen to us? What if they ignore what we say? What if they deny it? What if they don't even acknowledge what happened? I want to challenge you that when you're in relationship with someone, anyone, someone who loves you will want to resolve conflict with you. They will want to have resolution. They will want to pursue the growth journey with you. No matter, even if it might be painful, awkward, press on pride or insecurities, someone who wants to pursue that growth with you and who loves you will want to do that. And we need to be able to do the same thing when someone comes to us. So, how do we do this? And what does the Bible say about resolving conflict? I want to give us 4 points on what to do when resolving conflict. The first one is, do it as soon as possible. In the previous scripture I mentioned in Hebrews, it says to strive for peace, that we should be pursuing it with everyone. I don't mean strive for peace when you're in your emotional heightened state and everything is feeling really extreme, but do it as soon as possible to have a constructive conversation about it. Don't let it fester, and don't allow bitterness to grow inside you. Don't allow resentment to grow. Number 2, do it face to face. In Matthew 18:15 it says, "If your brother sins against you, go and tell him his fault, between you and him alone. If he listens to you, you have gained your brother." I know this doesn't say it in the Bible exactly, but communicating over text or a phone call does not allow someone to really see your tone of voice or your body language, which I think are key in solving conflict. Otherwise, we make up stories about what we think they are saying rather than what they're actually saying. A coworker of mine used to always text me, "Okay, fine." Based on my past experience, "okay, fine" is very passive aggressive and means you're not actually fine. So one day I went to him and I said, "Are you mad at me? Is everything okay?" And he's like, "Yeah, it's good. Why do you ask?" And I explained my whole thought about the "okay, fine," when really he was just like, "Yeah, I just meant okay, fine." And he was good with it. My interpretation was completely different from what he meant, just because I couldn't hear his tone at all in that message. My third point is to be aware of your language. In James 1:19-20, it says, "Know this, my beloved brothers, let every person be quick to hear, slow to speak, and slow to anger." In our conflict resolution, we should be willing to hear what the other person is saying and slow to speak. I want to break down a really simple way to do this. Most times when we're in conflict, we have high emotions and our first instincts are usually quite off. We often then go about conflict trying to figure out who is right and who is wrong instead of understanding what is happening in the disagreement. A great tool is to ask questions in conflict. Instead of thinking about what you want to say, consider what do you want to learn. Things like, why did that upset you? Or how are you seeing this situation? Or what did you hear when I did that? Or what did you feel when I did that? It helps us understand what is at the root cause of the conflict. The goal should always be to resolve the issue, not to hurt the person or to be right. And my fourth point is to own your part. We have to be willing to own up to our mistakes and leave others to own up to theirs. It says that God opposes the proud and gives grace to the humble. And we need to be able to own up to the places where we have hurt those around us. Finally, I want to look at one biblical example of conflict. One of Jesus' disciples is Peter. Peter is the one who walked on water towards Jesus. He was there at Jesus' transfiguration, at the prayer in the garden, the healing of Jairus' daughter. And in Matthew 16, Jesus says that Peter is the rock where he's going to build his church. Then the night before Jesus is betrayed, he tells Peter that Peter is going to deny him 3 times before the rooster crows. Peter, the man who has seen Jesus do so many things. Jesus saw what was going to happen, and he addressed the issue with him right there. But Peter said, "No, Jesus, that's not going to happen. I'm not going to deny you." However, the events Jesus predicted did take place. The next day, the betrayal happened. Peter weeps. In 3 Gospels, it's recorded that he weeps and breaks down. I think he knows he hurt his relationship. I think he knows that he betrayed Jesus. And I wonder if there was a part of him that was wondering if he would ever get the chance to ask for forgiveness, because Jesus was already taken to the officials. As we know, Jesus died on the cross and then rose again. And in Luke, it records that when Jesus rose from the grave, the women passed this information that the tomb was empty to the apostles. The men didn't believe it, but it says that Peter jumped up and ran to the tomb, and the tomb was empty. And after this, there are 2 more documented events with Jesus and Peter. One is that Jesus was appearing to his disciples. And in Luke 24:34, and it confirms it in 1 Corinthians 15:5, it says that Jesus appears to Peter. What happens in this appearance, we don't know. It's not narrated or told. But I wonder what that conversation was like. If Peter asked for forgiveness or Jesus was restoring that relationship. Sometime later as well, after he had risen, Peter and some of other disciples were fishing and they saw Jesus on the beach. Peter jumps into the water and swims to shore while the other disciples come back on land, and they all eat breakfast together. Again, I think Peter was running to Jesus because he wanted to restore his relationship. At this moment, Jesus asks Peter 3 times if Peter loves him, in which Peter replies 3 times, "Yes, Lord, you know I love you." And Jesus says, "Then go and feed my sheep." In this story, Jesus reveals himself to Peter. He shows mercy and grace to Peter. He restores relationship with Peter, and he encourages him. After this, Peter's character and self grows. Peter's the early spokesman for the early Christians. He spreads the gospel. He speaks to crowds, heals people, and he brings the good news to the Gentiles. Resolving conflict brings peace and restoration to our relationships. Our relationships are so important because they encourage us, they support us, they spur us on. And when we resolve conflict together, we are able to move forward in what Christ has for each one of us.